SMITE 2 just wrapped up its very first alpha weekend, and I gotta say there was some very good parts about it, but not all of it was sunshine and rainbows. I played a good amount of matches, had some good content out there for you guys, and now I'm ready to go ahead, put my thoughts all together, and really deliver them to you as succinct as I can, and give you the 411 on what I think this game is heading towards. So with all that said, why don't we go ahead and start with. So I've got a list written down here of the pros, the cons, the bugs, all that kind of stuff. Like I said, we're going to start off on a positive note, talk about some good things here. I think is a nice place to start. So first thing here I want to talk about is the item trees and just the items in general. I think they're pretty great. The shop itself can be kind of unintuitive and clunky, which I've heard a few other people say, and I do have to agree with that sentiment. It can feel kind of weird to get around it. I don't really like how the shop is kind of half your screen. You know, it just kind of pops up on the left side of your screen and that's it. I'm not a fan of that. In SMITE 1, we get an entire full screen shop, and you could make kind of an argument, hey, a smaller shop is good because if you get caught window shopping, then you'll kind of see an enemy coming, you know, window shopping deaths won't happen as much. Cool, you know, it's like we put seatbelts in cars a couple of decades ago because kiddos kept flying out the front window when dad hit the ice cream truck in front of you. Awesome, very great adjustment there. However, the thing is, if you're getting caught window shopping in SMITE and dying, that's kind of on you and you need to pay more attention. I don't think we need this tiny little shop to adjust for that in any sense, and I just really like the old layout of the shop in SMITE 1. Now there's some things like these sorting functions in the shop in SMITE 2 that I think are really good, especially when you can pick like 2 or 3 different sections at once. Like you could click strength and you could click physical protections, and you could have both of those clicked as once, and then that sorts you into items that only give you strength and physical protections, or you could just have one limiter on, stuff like that. I think that's really good. I very much so enjoyed that part of the shop, but overall it felt a little bit clunky and unintuitive, and me myself, how I kind of circumnavigated that is I would always just go down to the tier 3 items. I would kind of ignore the tier 1 and 2 items, and that kind of helped me learn the item trees faster, which this is going to be a pros section, not because I'm dunking on the items shop, but because I actually do like the items. First of all, let's say active items. I didn't even try that many of them, but they look really cool. They look really interesting, and I think the addition to the game that they can bring, the outplay potential they can bring, and just giving new abilities kind of to gods that usually wouldn't have them, I think is very, very interesting, and I think they have a long way to go where they can make a very nice system with those items. When it comes to kind of like the crafting trees, as I would call them, where you need to get components for these weapons and then build them into the full tier 3 items, I'm fine with it. And that's coming from me, who, if you watched some of my SMITE 1 videos going into this, and I was talking about SMITE 2, one of the things I was not excited for was this item system. I never liked League. I think it's a terrible game. I think it's just clicker simulator, and if you like it, that's fine, but I never liked that. That's why I always liked SMITE so much, because it did things differently in its own way that made it so unique that I loved so much, and the item system was part of that for me. But when I started playing SMITE 2, to my surprise, I actually really do like the item system. Do I like it more than SMITE 1's item system? I'm not going to say that yet. I'll need to play more in these upcoming alphas to really notch that down for a definitive answer, but the point is I do like it, and if it is the item system that they stick with, I have no problem with it, and I quite enjoy it. Now, overall, I'll say that it's just a pretty fun time. They're going to do different things, like getting rid of these placeholder icons they have for some of these items, like you can see right now. Polynomicon is literally just Polynomicon from SMITE 1, but it's purple now. But, you know, it's like, they'll fix that kind of stuff, but item system overall, I think is pretty darn good. It's at least on the right track. Coming up next, the game feel. So the game feel is something that I think is pretty darn good. It's nearly identical to SMITE 1, and I would say like 90% identical. When I started playing SMITE 2, and you can go watch my first video the other day when I played Kukulkan, that was my first match, and it felt just like SMITE 1. I didn't even really need more than like 2 minutes before I was like, oh yeah, this just feels like SMITE. And that was something I was very, very scared of and nervous going into. I was like, man, if this doesn't feel like SMITE, then I'm just going to be so bummed, because that's going to be a decade of me learning these things, getting this muscle memory, and then I go in here and it doesn't even feel the same at all. Like, that would suck, wouldn't it? But to my chagrin, it feels the same basically. The only thing I will add to that is that the game feels slower, and I've seen this from other people as well, and I do agree very, very much. The game definitely feels slower. Basic attacks, abilities being thrown, anything in that realm, it just feels slow. I think the best way I heard it earlier, I was watching like a Final K kind of give his thoughts on it a little bit, and he said it kind of feels like you're in a times like 0.8 Oleron ult all the time. So, it kind of just feels like maybe you're like 20% slower than in Smite 1. And it's enough to where you notice it and you kind of miss some basics sometimes, or an ability's kind of off, and you're just like, I just feel slow. So I very much agree with that. I can't really tell exactly what the problem with that is. Maybe it's animation times in terms of when they're actually hitting too. Maybe that's kind of like desynced, or the animations are just kind of too slow. If they kind of just speed up animations, that might help a lot. I think that might kind of be it in my opinion. But nonetheless, the game is definitely slow. But in case you were worried that it doesn't feel like Smite anymore, that Smite 2 won't feel like Smite 1, I'm here to tell you good news. It definitely does. It feels like Smite, and it's awesome. Next up here, I want to talk about a very fun addition, which is tower bounties. If you haven't seen those, essentially when you go up to a tower, it's going to have some lines on it. When you do like 1/3, I think it is, of the tower's health, you get your first tower bounty. That's going to give you a bunch of gold and I believe XP too. I think it's a really cool addition. And when you get to like the final third health, the third health, 1/3 health, I should say, of a tower. I couldn't find the words for that, but I think you understand what I mean. When it's 1/3 left and you knock it down to that last section of the tower's health, you get like a really big tower bounty. Now, the thing that I was noticing, one of the things I noticed is that it feels like there's a lot of snowball in Smite 2 and everyone's leveling up really quickly, especially if you're pushing lanes. I think those tower bounties, while they're a really, really cool addition, and while I want to see them continue, I think they need to be scaled down a little bit, because I felt like they were giving too much gold and XP. Like, I felt like they were just giving too much. Now, there is some cool play with it where the tower bounties, once they fall out of the tower, if you're not there to collect them within a certain amount of time, it's like a buff on the ground, they do expire. So you need to pay attention and pick those up, or else you do lose that bonus gold and XP. So keep that in mind. There is kind of a little thing there where you need to be present. So if you see on my tower right now, how I have that blue and that gold thing right there, if you saw that in the gameplay there, that's because those are tower bounties. And you can see even this Neath in front of me that's taking this tower, she's taking the tower bounties off of it right now. She's actually there, so she picked them up. She got a bunch of gold and XP. But it just seems like they're a little overscaled right now. But I think the actual gameplay mechanic of tower bounties is very cool, and I want to see it continued and just balance out a little more. I probably should have said this earlier, but you might want to get a little snack, maybe some lunch, dinner, whatever time of the day it is for you, and be prepared because this is going to be a long video, and we're not even scratching the surface of what I want to talk about today. So let's go ahead and continue on. Next, I want to talk about hybrid gods. I think they're very interesting, and for the most part, they're pretty well implemented. The biggest one that I've seen is Neath, of course. People are building her where she does have some strength scaling, some intelligence scaling. You can build her in pretty easily into ability power, or you can use her for her basic attacks, build some crits or whatever you want to do. I think they're doing pretty well with that stuff, but there is some weird things that I'm kind of noticing where they want to do like this hybrid stuff, and they're like, ooh, look at this, you could scale it off intelligence. And Odin, who you see in the gameplay now, is a pretty good example. I got a godlike in this gameplay. Right there, you can see I'm like getting a divine, right? The thing is, even though I built pretty high intelligence, and I went a Polynomicon in my build, I was having fun with that, and I was goofing around. But in terms of actually being viable in meta, you're not going to build like that. Because for Odin, at least, the only thing that's scaling off of your intelligence is the health on your shield. So the health on your 2, right? Your shield health. But the thing is, that scales at a 55% rate. But the health on Odin's shield scales at a 50% rate off of strength. So you can still just build the health on his shield off of strength. So if you want to build 0 intelligence on Odin, you can do it, and you can scale completely easily. So there's really no point if you don't want to build intelligence on Odin. You don't have to ever build a lick of intelligence on him, and it's completely fine. So my question is, with these hybrid gods, should it be like that, to where if you want to go intelligence in your build, maybe you get a little bit of an extra kickback? Because the thing for me is, why would I never ever just build intelligence, right? It seems like 100% of the time it's always better to just full on go for strength and not sacrifice an entire strength item just to get one intelligence item and scale 5% harder on your shield health. It doesn't quite make sense to me. So I want to see them kind of work on these hybrid gods a little bit, but overall I think they're a very fun idea, and I think that they were implemented like 80% well, and they just have a little farther to go to really get them cracking how they should be. Now after that, this is going to be a pretty quick one to cover, but loading into matches is very, very fast, especially compared to Smite 1. We all know when you're loading to a Smite 1 match, you're sitting there, you're waiting for everyone to load, and it can take like 2 minutes sometimes, because you're just waiting, and you're seeing the god borders light up, and it takes a while. Luckily, I can tell you in Smite 2 here, it goes really quick. I don't think I had a loading time longer than maybe like 20 seconds. Like, they all loaded very quickly, so that's a very nice part. Now, after that, I want to say the look of the game is quite beautiful, and I'm very excited to see like the full potential it can reach as they keep making more of unique assets for the game, and they keep like optimizing it. The thing is, a lot of us other content creators I saw as well, we couldn't even play on like high settings. I think I was on like medium for like the actual graphic quality, as you can see here, and it was still running into a lot of game like just running problems. I'm not like on the best PC build in the world, but it should be running, I think, a little better, and obviously they just need to kind of optimize a little better, but the game still does look really good. I saw some people being like, it's so ugly, it just still looks like Smite 1, and it's like, I'm sorry, I think you're kind of huffing copium because you want to hate the game, if you really think that, because the game looks good, guys. Like, if look at that ult coming out from the Kukulkan right there, like Kukulkan Tornado, like he's just a great god at showing off that the game looks really good. Odin, even with his bird bomb and stuff, like it looks really nice. The effects are good. The effects on the abilities are good. I just really like it. I think they did good. Like, look at that Phoenix right there, where it has like this cool like dragon egg around it. The effect on the Titan, where it's all like rainbow and iridescent before it's actually attacked. Stuff like that is where you really see that they're shining with these like new graphics that they can use, and I'm excited to see where they can go from there in the future. We're winding down here in the pros section. I want to talk about one more big thing that I think was super positive, that I actually didn't see used by my teammates a lot, and I want to see that change, which is going to be the teleporters. So you'll see on the minimap, there's 2 teleporters on each side of the map. Those are a very great addition in my opinion, and you can use them to TP all the way across the map to the other teleporter. Now, I didn't really see those used, like I was saying, like my teammates were barely ever using those, but there was a few times where I was using them, especially when I was playing jungle. You'll see it in my Finner video, you'll see it in my Loki video if you watch those, and I was just using those things to gank. Even in this Odin video, I was using it a few times just to go across to duo lane and just gank these guys and just have fun team fights, because people don't see it coming, because they don't think about it, because sure, we have a TP in Smite 1 right now, but in terms of the lifespan of Smite 1, the teleporter is a relatively new game mechanic, right? It hasn't been there for a long time. People really don't think about it, and I think these portals, by the way, are up literally at second 1. I'm not quite sure, but I think the earliest I took a portal was within like the first 5 minutes at one point. Like, you can take the portals really early in the game, so that's pretty darn cool when you think about it. Like, the outplay potential, the early ganks you could possibly do. Imagine if the support, like, we lived in a meta some point in Smite 2's history as it goes on here, where the meta was like support to rotate out at like, you know, level 3 once they have most of their regular abilities, and then just go and gank solo really quick, and then back to base, and then run straight back to duo lane. Like, that's some of the cool stuff you could do with those teleporters, and I wasn't seeing that, but I'm excited for people to actually start using them more, because there is some crazy outplay potential that's possible with these teleporters, so I'm excited to see that in the future. But with that being talked about, that's all I have to talk about for the pros and the good things about Smite 2 right now. Now, I do want to say before we get to anything bad, I'm not trying to tear Hi-Rez down in any way. I think they're a pretty great company, and they've taken care of the community, in my opinion, quite well over the years. I really do respect the people that work there and the just heart that goes into everything they do, and you can tell that Smite 2 has so much passion going into it from the devs and everyone at Hi-Rez, and I just really respect that. So anything that I'm saying is completely because when I've watched like their live streams and stuff, and they're talking about it, and they're talking about the feedback they want from us as the player base, they tell us, go ahead, tell us the bad things especially. Like, they wanted positive feedback, of course, but overall what Hi-Rez asked from us was to give us the actual hard facts and tell us what was wrong, because that's where they want to go ahead and fix it. So anything that I'm saying is not going to be mean-spirited or disrespectful in any way. All I'm going to say in this like cons and bugs section is pointing out things that I think are very much so wrong and that I want to see corrected, because I have so much potential seen in this game, and I want to see it go that far distance. So with all that said, I think we're ready to go ahead and jump on into the... Alright, I know how the internet works by now after doing YouTube for several years now, so I'm pretty sure that people are here for the negativity. So if you are negative Nancy, that's fine. Let's go ahead and get into what you're waiting for, the real meat, or should I say meat and potato tins. Alright, so here's the thing. There's some pretty bad parts. I have notes here written. I've been reading off them for the positive parts, and I'm going to do the same for here. I'm just going to go ahead and read this first one verbatim from what I wrote as I was planning how I wanted to talk about the cons and the pros and stuff in this video. So, what I said was, everyone having beads is cheeks. Blink being everyone's relic would make much more sense, or in my opinion, having no universal relic at all would be better. If beads exist, they should be something you are consciously acquiring while losing the benefit of a different relic as in Smite 1. The ability to gank or set up on a support becomes exponentially harder when every single person can easily go CC immune. So hopefully that's kind of obvious. I'm getting at beads being on everyone sucks. There's a reason that it's not the meta to build beads on a support, and people flame you in Smite 1 when you go and be selfish and build beads on support. Same thing if you're in solo lane a lot of the time. You don't get that option because you're supposed to be the tanks. You're not supposed to have a free get out of jail card. You're supposed to actually play well, be strategic, and plan when you go into a fight smart, and use your protections and your extra health to survive. Use your CC that you can put on the enemies to peel yourself and your teammates and set up for your teammates to survive. Let their damage keep you alive. But in Smite 2, for some reason, I go in and I'm just getting to walk out of situations that I have no right to walk out of when I messed up because I got a get out of jail free card with my beads when I'm playing it on Athena? That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, what are we doing with that? That's what I was saying when I wrote this down. Beads needs to be this risk reward. It needs to be you go into a match just like in Smite 1, oh look, Ares is on the other team. Of course, since I'm an Anubis mid laner, I'm going to build beads. And then Ares comes around, they try to pluck your beads off of you, and once they have your beads off of you, they make sure they attack you again on cooldown, and they get to actually pull you with that Ares ult because you used your beads. That's what it should be. Or you are not as skilled of a player. Maybe you just weren't thinking whatever it is. You wanted to be a little riskier. You wanted an Aegis. You didn't even get those beads. You thought you were Anubis. I'll just use the CC immunity on my ultimate every time Ares comes around, and I'll just CC immune his ult that way. Sure, you could do that, but that's a risk reward because you wanted Blink on that Anubis instead because maybe you were Anubis jungle. I'm making up situations here that could very well happen, but in Smite 2, they can't because everyone gets that beads for free. And I just don't like that. I very much so am not a fan of that. Beads for everyone needs to go. Just not something that I think is good. I think it's going to hurt the overall and the long-standing health of Smite 2 and make the balancing even harder. So that's my first big gripe with Smite 2. The first thing that I noticed in every single one of my matches, there was always at least one point where I sat there and I went, man, I do not like this change. I do not like it. Even when I was getting out of situations, I would sit there and be kind of annoyed, like, man, that enemy just outplayed me. I did not deserve to live, and yet here I am because I had this free get out of jail card. Next up, something else that I really don't like is the grass. This one might be a little more controversial. We might argue about this one a little more, and that's completely fine. If you like the grass, I kind of get it. Here again, I'm going to read from my notes again. I was saying I don't like the mechanic. In fact, I hate the mechanic. I think it's kind of just borrowing too much from League. It takes away from Smite's uniquity, and the fact that we get a free ward feels pointless because the grass is in the game. Here's what I mean by that. When you use the free ward on the jungle to spot out a gank that's incoming, you have to place it in one of several. You place it in the jungle, right? Cool. But if you used your ward in the jungle, then you can't use it on the grass patches. So then you're vulnerable there. But if you use it on the grass patch, you can't use it on the jungle to see people that are incoming. That's pretty crazy, especially when you think about the fact that we are only given one ward. We can't buy 2 wards anymore, so you only get the opportunity to ward one area of the map, so you have to pick either the jungle or the grass spot. So giving us less access to information while also making it easier to gank people because of the grass is a crazy choice that does not make sense to me. I can't quite comprehend that. So let me restate that one more time for you. Let's go down the little spreadsheet here, like the little order of events that we're going here from Hi-Rez. They said, here's more opportunity to gank because we're giving you spots where you can go invisible and enemies won't even know you're there. Okay. We're also giving you a free ward so you can spot out enemies and you don't even have to pay for it or think about it. That ward is always with you. Okay. However, we're only giving you 1 ward. You can't even get 2 anymore. So you couldn't even ward high and low on the right side of your jungle. Okay. That sucks. So you're losing information there. However, if you plan on warding the jungle in the slightest, cool. Now you're completely susceptible to getting ganked from that grass. Oh, you went and took your red buff? Cool, at least you warded the enemy on the right jungle. Ooh, sorry, they ran out of the left jungle, and now they're standing in a patch of grass, which, by the way, how the fuck is Cthulhu, who's gonna be like 70,000 feet tall, standing in a little patch of grass like a fucking ferret from the Pokemon franchise? Actually, I'm supposed to believe that he's hiding in a patch of grass, Hi-Rez? That's not really making much sense to me there, but let's get rid of logic for a second. Let's say he's still hidden. Cool. I didn't see him come out of that left jungle because I had one ward and I warded in the right jungle. Now I'm basically just a free gank and I die. And you could say, well, that's the balancing point for having beads. You have less information, but everybody has beads, so you're a little bit safer. I would rather not have that. That's one thing that I really like that SMITE 2 did perfectly. I want less free safety. I want less low skill free safety in the form of free beads, and I want more high skill strategic plays, as in having 2 wards and having to actually think and be the better player who places those at strategic points that I have noticed my enemies are ganking me from, so that I can cut off those ganks in the future and actually just be winning because of my own strategy and looking out with information. That's where I think SMITE 2 is going wrong with the wards in the grass situation, and I think I can't explain it any easier than I just did right there. I laid it out pretty simply. If you disagree, that's fine. Tell me why in the comments, because I would love to hear your opinions on it, but I very much hate the grass. Let's move on to the next thing here, which is that we need a UI editor. My minimap, look at the screen right now. Look how small that minimap is. The first thing I did when I opened my settings in game is I tried to edit my UI. I tried to find it. There wasn't any. You can't make the minimap smaller, and that sucks because minimap is such a big part of SMITE, and I was just not looking at it as much because it was so small, and I was kind of just like forgetting about it. If you look at my SMITE 1 content, my minimap is huge, and then you just crank down the opacity on it so you can see through it anyways, because that's what like higher tier SMITE players are doing. You know, we're just always looking at the minimap. That's what you're doing in SMITE, because again, information is king. But here, it doesn't quite happen. You just have this tiny little minimap. Not a fan of that. We need a UI editor. And again, I completely excuse them for not having the UI editor right now. It makes sense. It's just like a very early alpha. So I understand why they don't have it, but I would love if they did have it by one of the next 2 alphas, because again, I really do want to edit my UI. After that, game optimization. Again, this is a thing where I completely understand that it's not optimized yet. Again, it's literally the very first alpha that they had for us. It's still closed alpha and everything, so I understand why the game is not optimized yet, but there's a lot of problems with it and where it very much so needs the optimization, so I hope they can get that stuff sorted out very, very soon here, because the game just did feel very clunky and unoptimized, which, again, just to state it one more time, I completely understand why it felt like that, because, hey, it's a freaking alpha, and it makes sense that it is not optimized yet. That is literally the point of the alpha, so they can show you it in an unoptimized state, and then you can give your feedback and they can optimize it while they make it better. So it makes sense, but still, it did suck out to experience it in kind of a very clunky state. Either way, if it's, you know, excused or not, it was still kind of stinky. Next up is a bug we're going to talk about that if you saw my content on SMITE 2, you heard me complain about this bug every single video, because oh my god, it was so frustrating to deal with, and that is going to be the auto walk key. If you're a SMITE 1 player, then you know that the auto walk key is kind of like giving a paraplegic guy an electric wheelchair, you know? You don't gotta crank those wheels anymore, buddy. You can just press a little lever and you are fucking scooting. But in SMITE 2, the auto walk button is still there. I assigned it to my left shift key. It's the same key binding that I have in SMITE 1. The thing was, I would need to press it anywhere between like 2 and 7 times before it actually worked. I think I narrowed down why the bug was happening, and I think what was happening is that whenever you pressed the input of the auto walk key, what would happen is it would essentially just keep ticking it over and over. There wasn't like a, oh, you clicked it once, so we're gonna lock out the key there so that it can't be pressed again automatically. No, it just kept like instantly putting the command in. So what you had to do was hope you got lucky, and that when you tapped it once and you let go of it, that it would actually proc as, yes, you are on with your auto walk. But sometimes you would click it really fast for like 0.1 seconds and it would be like, oops, it just input its own keybind like 4 different times and now it's still off. And it was like, bro. So you would just like be clicking it. And there, again, you'll see in my videos where I'd be like, okay, I just pressed the auto walk button 6 times before it finally worked. So that's a bug they need to very much so look at, because it was really freaking annoying. Next up, this is maybe my biggest gripe, and again, you probably heard me talk about this a lot in my videos, and there's some specific things that I want to talk about here that really give good credence to this. So what I'm going to talk about is that abilities are very hard to see and tell when they are coming at you sometimes. In SMITE 1, there are big solid line targeters on the ground. Let's think about any ability in SMITE 1 being cast at you. It's usually very red to actually show you that it is an enemy's ability, and where the exact outlines of it are very, very, very clear in SMITE 1. In SMITE 2, not so much. Look at that cuckoo NATO in front of me right now. and I know the gameplay might be a little bit off from what I'm talking versus how I edit this, but you should still see it around there some point. The point is, it's a very small outline, and as it's actually winding up that tornado, you barely see it winding up. There's not a thick line like there should be to tell you, watch out, don't step here, because that's what it should be. If I was going to step on a bear trap, that would suck. But if it was a completely big old red X in front of me that was like, look out, bear trap, I would go, oh shoot, that's a bear trap. And then I wouldn't step on it. And that's the thing that we get in Smite 1. There's very clear outlines on every single ability in the game, and it very clearly shows you whose team it's on, so you know what you're walking into. One thing I saw when I played Loki is that he has this skin called the Infiltrator skin, and all the effects on it are red. And when an enemy, or when Loki on my team was using it, all the effects were still red. Look at it, it's on the screen right now, actually, you can see. It has a very small blue outline, but it doesn't even matter because the entire thing is covered in red. You can't even tell it's an enemy or a teammate ability half the time. I noticed that and I had to point it out to you guys because I hated it so much. The biggest egregious example of this that I saw was Kukulkan Ultimate. It has no targeter on it to show you when an enemy Kukulkan is coming at you. So if you cast it and it starts behind like a wall or something, you have like 0.2 seconds to actually avoid it. And the actual targeter on it, I think that the hitbox on it is broken too. Same thing with his Kukulkan Tornado. I think the hitbox on that is not correct either. The last thing I'll say is Neathult. A few times I saw Neathult, and usually in Smite 1, it has like an arrow that shows you where it's coming from, I'm pretty sure. In Smite 2, it was just like there was nothing. So you just had to like guess where the Neath was and where it was coming from. And it was like so annoying. So there's a few things there that I very much still need to fix, but I was just very annoyed in every single match that I played when I was like, I don't know. I cannot tell when an ability is being used on me. And it was so frustrating because I'm just sitting there ready to fight, and then suddenly all my health is gone in half a second because I didn't even know an ability was spawning on me. Like a Zeus ult was just, boop, it was used on your head, and you barely even had time to react to it. And even when it was on you, you weren't even seeing it that much because the effects were just not there. So that's something I very much so need to see fixed because it was not looking good. It's at this point that you're probably wondering how I'm so good at talking, or maybe you're just wondering why I'm so annoying and how I'm talking so much. I will remind you that I am the valedictorian of the class of 2000 and 3000 from Yap University, so, you know, I have some credentials there. Anyways, let's go ahead and continue on because there's a lot more to talk about. Next up, I want to say this. It feels like there's too much damage overall in the game, which leads into the fact that protections can also sometimes feel kind of useless. There was many times, even on a god as Athena, with basically no intelligence to my scaling, that my damage still was like half hitting people in the duo lane. And this was kind of like going into mid-game too that it was still doing that, and it felt really wrong. Conversely, even as I was completely kitted with prots, I felt like I was being blown up in seconds and I really had no recourse upon my enemies. So I kind of talked about this a little bit before, but we're going to keep talking about it a little more now, but it just feels like there's too much damage in the game. I feel like I get blown up way too fast, and when I am on a god like Athena or Amir where I was playing and I was building these full protection kits, I still felt like I was getting blown up in half a second, and especially when you can't see abilities coming half the time because the targeters are bad, it all leads back into each other, where you're just getting blown up, and even on a tank I felt like I was getting blown up. So it kind of felt like, man, am I just not supposed to build full tanky? Like, am I wasting my time building full tanky? Because every time I freaking did it, I just felt useless doing it. I felt like I couldn't sit in a team fight for more than half a second without getting punished for it. So that's something I definitely want to see changed. I think protections need to actually be scaled differently to where they actually matter more. And then on top of that, I think that the scaling on abilities, their base scaling maybe might be the problem. It's either that or it's the scaling on items with intelligence and strength. Whatever it is, Hi-Rez can actually analyze that better. But my entire point is, there's too much damage in the game. Things are hitting too hard, and maybe they're just hitting too often. Whatever it is, it needs to be figured out because prots feel like they're just not enough and damage feels like it's too much. Next up, I'm going to say towers are too weak, and I'm going to specify what I mean by that because the actual damage out of towers is good. In fact, that feels like something that's actually kind of perfectly balanced in my opinion. The amount of damage that towers can do to you and Phoenixes, I think is perfect. But the amount of damage they take feels kind of ridiculously low. like especially tier 1 towers. And something I want to say is we've gone through this very recently in Smite 1. If you remember back within these past 2 seasons, a big change that Hi-Rez made was buffing up every single tower and Phoenix on the map because they realized these things are falling down way too easily. They crumble so fast and players aren't even really having time to respond or sit in their lane with any kind of recourse because these towers are too squishy. So they buffed them up. They got more protections, they got more health, and nowadays in Smite 1, towers and birds, they feel quite tanky. But in Smite 2, it feels like they're falling into the same trap as they had in Smite 1, where they just let them be really squishy right now, and I'm not really comprehending the decision making on that. It's like you learn these lessons, and you're supposed to be taking those lessons and applying them into Smite 2 here so you don't repeat those same mistakes, yet for some reason they are still making those same exact mistakes, and it doesn't really make sense to me. So they need to buff up the protections and health on these towers because they're crumbling way too fast, especially the enemy minions, and I will say those brute minions, those big old like minotaur guys with the swords that are throwing fireballs for some reason, because it's like they have a sword but for some reason they throw fireballs. It's kind of like if I brought a catapult to a fight but then I just put myself inside of it and launched myself with like a kitchen knife. That's kind of what it feels like with those guys. I don't really know what they're doing, but either way they're hitting way too hard and these towers are just way too squishy. Now, next up off of that, oh, but I do want to finish that by saying, I talked about tower bounties earlier, how that was a really good addition to the game, but if the towers are too squishy, then the tower bounties are even more unbalanced, because the towers are squishy, but then you get a bunch of free farm from them, so that doesn't really add up, does it? I'm gonna hear to tell you the answer is no, it doesn't add up at all. Okay, next up. Every god feels kind of OP, akin to a new god release in Smite 1. So when Hi-Rez releases gods in Smite 1, what they do is they make them kind of OP in nature. Because if they don't make a god kind of OP when they come out, people don't play them. And they have the data for that. And if you're a Smite 1 veteran like me, then you've seen it happen 1,000 times where a god comes out. Did that happen like Soul's release or something? It was someone like her. And they come out and they're just not strong. They're not strong enough, and since they can't fit into the meta immediately, people don't pick them up, and they don't use them. And so that god has to go through so many balancing problems where Hi-Rez tries to make them viable, and then they just kind of sometimes never really come back into the meta. You know, you look at Baba Yaga, who has had her time every now and again, but there's a lot of times where she's just like so ridiculously underpowered, and I feel like even her release, she was like good, but she was just not like kicking crazy cheeks, and she just never really had her crazy time in the sun like some other gods have, like Tsukuyomi, for example, who's always been good since his release. He's been OP on his release for a long time, and nowadays he's still incredibly strong, you know? Stuff like that. So I need to see some changes there, I think, because every single god in Smite 2 right now just felt incredibly strong. So I would like to see those kind of brought down. Again, just that's going to be a general balancing thing that they're going to fix as Smite 2 goes on, but they did feel just way too strong right now. Alright, we're kind of winding down here, but I got a few more things I want to talk about. The next one's going to be a bug that I was noticing that was really annoying me, which is the VGS. I'm very glad that they're bringing back the VGS system, which the S stands for system, so that's kind of redundant, but I'm very glad they're bringing back VGS in Smite 2. It's a system that I very much so enjoy, but it is kind of bugged out right now. When you use your VGS in game, you drop frames like crazy. And it's really annoying. Like, you're just dropping frames. Like, you can't VGS in a fight without just dropping a bunch of frames, or anywhere, to be honest with you. You're walking down frames, you're walking down lane, and you're just VGSing, your frames are just like dropping by 20 every time, and it's just like, what are we doing there? So that needs to be fixed. And secondly, there's another bug with VGS where if your VGS ends in a movement key, that being WAS or D, so if I pressed like, what's a good one? If I pressed VSAA, which is all attack, right? But I was backing, you know, and I was backing to base, and I wanted to say all attack because I'm going to attack a lane or something once I get out of base. Then it would stop my backing. Pressing that last A would kick you out of your backing animation. And in Smite 1, that's not a problem. You can finish your VGS and it's locking you out of that movement, so it's not accidentally clicking it. But I think it's just a problem again, where it's the same problem with the auto walk, where like I think keys are just kind of pressing too much on their own, and they're getting kind of like locked down when you press them for like half a second. I think that's what the bug is that I've analyzed, at least. But of course, I'm not any kind of coder or developer or anything, but I think that's how it's working. So if that's even like making sense as I'm explaining it, then hopefully they can go ahead and fix it a little bit based off of that sort of overview right there. Next up, second to last thing, certain sound effects. The sound effects are good, but some of them are way too loud. Like when you're hitting a tower, it's too loud. And especially when you take a phoenix. Have you guys heard when a phoenix dies? It's like your girl, which, sorry, you guys don't have girls. It's like when a whale is beached and you go up to it and you're like, "You doing okay, fella?" And it just does the most ungodly, loudest screeching moan in your ear. That's what it feels like when a phoenix dies right now. It's way too loud, so they need to adjust some of the sound in this game because some of it is just way too loud and it's really annoying. So Fix that, high res, that would be nice. And then the last thing here is split pushing. I want it to be killed. Do you know why everyone hated Loki? Think about it. In Smite 1, why did everyone hate Loki? I'll tell you the answer. It's because he was nothing but a split pushing loser for like 7 years of Smite's history before he finally got reworked. Even nowadays, these losers kind of sit on Loki and they just split push. My very first match of Smite 2 was ruined because this dude split pushed into my Phoenix and killed my Titan, and my entire team was unaware because the game was not making it apparent. It barely said anything to us. It barely showed anything. My minimap was too small, so I wasn't paying attention to it. We were actually in a team fight the entire time. It would just sucks. Split pushing is a skillless, annoying strategy that I want to see be eradicated in Smite 2. Winning a game should be off of using better strategy in team fights. It should be about fighting your enemy and actually out-gamering them and winning that fight and then getting some objectives and pushing in and winning the game by taking their Titan. It shouldn't be about you walking away from the entire fight on the other side of the map and hitting a PvE object with some basic attacks, and then you get to win off of that. It sucks, it's low skill, it ruins competitive integrity, and I want to see it eradicated. I don't have too many ideas. I think it's a very hard subject and it's a very hard thing to fix, but the idea that I kind of had, and this is just a very rough idea that I thought of when I was kind of thinking of how I may have fixed it, is that right now you could do this to tier 2 towers, maybe, but at least do this to Phoenixes, where you need to have at least 2 gods inside of the range of it, and if you don't have at least 2 gods inside of the radius of that bird, then it has incredibly high protections and health. Even if you have backdoor protections down, if you're solo, then that would make it to where that actual bird objective, the Phoenix, is way tankier, and it would take you at least 2 times as long to take it, which would give the enemies actual time to respond and stop you from split pushing as easily. So you could still technically do it, but it would be way harder, and that's kind of what you're trying to do when you balance something and you don't want to take it out of the game completely, because making it to where they couldn't at all would suck. But if you have at least 2 people there, then that's a good balancing point to where it's like, okay, now your team is 5v3ing in that fight across the other side of the map. Now we kill their other 3, and we take Fire Giant, and we push enemy in the game anyways, so your duo split push doesn't work, you know? It just is pointless at that point. But having one person out of the fight, you could still win a 4v5, or at least hold yourself in the 4v5 to where you don't lose the game off of it, and you get a Phoenix, you know? So it's like, it's just not good. It's skillless. I hate that. So if there's one thing I want to see changed, it's split pushing. I want to see it taken out of the game. It needs to be gone. But with that out of the way, yeah, I think that's really everything I have. I was writing my thoughts down the entirety of these 3 days that I was playing the Smite 2 Alpha. Anything that I noticed that I liked, that I didn't like, that was buggy, I wrote it down, and that's everything that I told you guys today. And I yapped for a very long time, obviously, so please go to the comments, tell me what you agree with, tell me what you disagree with. If you haven't played the game yet, then obviously I would like if you say that in your opinions. Because I would like to know if you've actually played the game when you leave your feedback, because that's a big indicator. Because some people are gonna be like, oh, the game just looks so clunky or whatever, but it's like when you actually play it, it does feel like Smite 1. Like, it's not incredibly clunky, it's a little bit, but it's not crazy clunky. So when I see people just like saying that and giving their opinions, especially when they're just dunking on Smite 2 and they're like, oh, rip, it's dead, it's over for Smite, like, blah, blah, blah. No, you need to shut the fuck up. Smite 2 has so much incredible potential. Like I said earlier, the people that are making it like clearly have a lot of heart into it, and they know what their end goal is. I think that the potential there is enormous. I think that it's heading incredibly in the correct direction, and I think Hi-Rez is going to be very good, as they have been in the past, in my opinion, at taking feedback, fixing what needs fixed, and I think we're going to be going in a very good direction here. I have extremely high hopes that as more gods funnel into this game, as they keep putting them in, like, I'm excited for Nuwa to be in the game and just like play that. I think that's my favorite god sometimes. Like, having her in the game and just having all these bugs fixed and stuff, the game's going to be magnificent. Imagine this game a year from now when it's coming out and it's like actually optimized and these bugs are gone and the game is way more balanced and all these items are just good and everyone doesn't have beads anymore, because hopefully they listen to that, and grass is gone maybe, and all of our favorite gods are back in the game. It's going to be awesome. So I'm incredibly excited. If you can't tell, I'm just spieling at this point because I am incredibly excited to see the future of Smite 2. This is a game that I've poured over a decade of my time into, and it really is just like something that I hold very dear to myself. So seeing it getting improved and then wanting the feedback, I'm super happy. So tell me your feedback again. I'd love to hear from you guys. And I'll see you back on the Battleground of the Gods, because I got a few more Smite 2 videos for you, and then we'll kick it back into Smite 1, and we're going to continue our ranked series. Maybe we'll do some more casual God request type videos here soon again. But hey, before we end the video, I do just want to say thank you to everyone who's been supporting this SMITE 2 content, this SMITE 1 content, if literally anything that you've done at all, leaving likes, comments, like, I really do appreciate it. It's just, you wouldn't keep making videos, honestly, if you didn't have people there being kind, and you guys always do that, so I appreciate you a lot. But that is going to do it for me today, so as always, have a great day.